Cyberpunk has started.
What's up, everybody? In this crash course tutorial for Shadows of Esteren by Studio Agate, we're going to go over healing and alternative forms of damage. All right, let's get started. So you can see here I have the health condition chart up. We went over this in the combat tutorial, so make sure you watch that first so you know how we get to this point. So as you take damage, you're pretty much just checking off these circles. You can see as you kind of rank up the chart here, you're going from good to okay, bad, critical, all the way up to agony. And as you get past good into okay, you see these sort of penalties that you get to pretty much every check that you have to roll. So you want to heal up, you want to rest, you want to fix any damage that you have. And that's why we have this video. Let's get into it. The first thing that I want to go over is agony. It also involves being in critical condition as well, but agony is the important one here. As you saw, once you get down there and that box is checked, your character collapses and goes unconscious, unable to perform any action. If no one, and you can see, I'll just read right from here, if there is nobody to attend her within 1d10 minutes, the character dies. So once you get up to agony, it's imperative that you get some help. You're going to collapse unconscious. You're going to have to rely on teammates or someone to basically come and try to help you. At that point, you roll your 1d10. You have within that time for someone to come and help you. Basically, they have to roll. You can read right here, a first aid or a medicine check. They have to beat a difficulty of 17 in order to stop the dying process. In which case, then you roll a 1d10, and that many hours later you regain consciousness. Basically, you uncheck the agony box and you end up in the critical condition. Now you can see right here, you cannot walk without assistance. You need to rest. You're going to spend, and it says spending a day in critical condition without any medical care requires a complicated 14 stamina roll. And again, in character creation, that crash course, I go over the different stats and domains, disciplines, and how to get your stamina statistic. But you make your stamina plus 1d10 check. You have to beat a 14. That's if you're not getting medical help, basically medical care during those times of rest, hopefully. Failing the roll basically means that the character dies from her injuries. You can see right there. So, I've said it before in the previous crash course videos that this game is brutal. You're going to find out in this video when I go over different ways of healing and these checks just how brutal it can be. So there you go. That's when you get up to agony. Let's get into healing. Basically, you're going to want to rest. That's the number one thing here. So right when you get an injury, you have as long as it's within minutes, keeping in mind every round, I go over rounds in combat. Every round is about 6 seconds. So think about, within a few minutes, a handful of minutes maybe, of getting damaged, getting injuries. If someone can come and do a medicine check, medicine or first aid, and beat a DV14, you can get a point back from your damage. So instantly get a point back that way, as long as it's, within minutes of getting that damage. But here's other things that you can do. Basically, a character who is resting can recover up to 3 damage points for every 24 hours. You get a point basically if you get a good night's sleep. You get a point back if you got a full day rest, a full day's rest. You can't do activities, can't engage in combat, any of that stuff. You have to rest. The third way to get the point is basically if someone has an appropriate discipline. So depending on the injury and stuff, they would do a basic discipline or domain check and try to get you a point back every single day. So you want to rest. You want to get good sleep. You want to hopefully be around someone that has some type of domain or discipline and can, do some type of check. And you can do that to yourself as well if you have the right discipline or domain, basically the right skill to treat yourself for that injury. And then each day the character must succeed a standard 11 stamina roll for the recovery to be effective. So aside from doing those recoveries and all that, you have to do a stamina check every day and just at least beat a basic 11, a standard 11 for the recovery to be effective. Penalties for let's just make sure we go over all this. Penalties for that the okay, bad, and critical conditions apply to the daily stamina roll. So keeping that in mind, let's go back here. Let's see, right there. So you're okay. You got a -1 penalty in bad. You have a -2 critical, a -3. So that affects it. That affects your standard stamina check daily as you go as well. So you want to be reducing that so you can reduce those negative penalties as you go, so you can heal better and faster. That's the idea there. Now, again, keeping in mind, if a wounded PC does not receive appropriate care while he is resting, a failure indicates that his condition worsens by 1 point. So as you fail, you take more damage. So it's not just staying the same and then trying to heal as you go. Like, you can actually take on damage by not healing as you go. So again, another example of how this game is brutal. If the character engages in strenuous activity, moves too much, or fights as he is wounded, he will not recover any points, as I mentioned before. You want to rest. That's the main thing. Right after you get injured, heal, try to get it treated. Then get some rest every day. Try to heal yourself if you have the right discipline or domain. Try to get somebody else to help you with that. If you don't, get a good night's sleep aside from daily rest, and you'll max out and get that 3 points back every day. All right, aside from healing, I want to go over alternative forms of damage, because aside from getting hit by weapons and arrows and punched and all that sort of stuff, there's other ways that you can get hurt. Let's go over the first one, which is falling. Falling deals 1d10 damage points for every 10 feet, up to 20 feet. The PC can attempt a complicated 14 feet roll. And if you remember, when I go over in the crash course tutorial where I go over how to do it's the core mechanics and how to do resolution checks, basically, which are like skill checks. You have a domain called feats. And if you add that to your 1d10 to the associated ways, which is kind of like your main stats, and beat a 14 complicated, basically you take half that damage, half of that 1d10 damage per 10 feet falling. If you have a tumbling roll to land, if you beat a 17 difficulty with a tumbling roll, you can land unscathed. And now, keeping in mind, tumbling is a discipline. So again, in that video where I go over the core mechanics and resolution checks, again, watch the damage and watch that video before you watch this one, so this one makes better sense. But just to do little mini recaps as I go, if you have not just the domain but the discipline in tumbling and beat a 17, you can actually tumble out of that fall unscathed, 0 damage. So keep that in mind. That's why it's important to increase your domains up to disciplines. All right, the next thing here I want to go over, alternative forms of damage, is being blinded, which inflicts a -4 penalty on all actions requiring sight, which includes attacks and defenses. Now, the blind fighting or acute senses disciplines can half this penalty. So again, where I go over disciplines and domains, if you have the blind fighting or acute senses disciplines, you can actually half that penalty to down to a -2. So another way that disciplines can really help you out. The last thing I want to go over as far as alternative damage and things are holding breath. So a character can hold her breath during a number of rounds equal to twice her stamina rating. So you take that stamina rating, you double it, and that's how many rounds you can hold your breath. So a round lasts 6 seconds, as I mentioned before. Beyond this duration, she has to succeed in a complicated 14 stamina roll every 2 rounds without taking a breath. A failure means she loses consciousness. A natural 1 on this, and again, I went over critical successes and failures. So again, a natural 1 on this roll causes death from suffocation or drowning. If an unconscious character is not immediately put in a situation where she can breathe, she must succeed in a stamina roll on each following round with an increasing difficulty threshold. So 14, then 17, then 20, or she will die. So you see again, like, the crit failure there can result in suffocation and dying. The stamina checks every 2 rounds as you go beyond that, increase in difficulty, or you'll die again. So you got to be careful. So that's holding breath, or, in any sense, suffocating, drowning, that sort of thing. Now, one more thing to go over in this video. Something that's very important, and that's diseases. Let me bring up the virulence chart of disease. So in Shadows of Esteren, there's lots of chances to get diseases where they're contaminated by coming in contact with something. Maybe there's something going around, like seasonal locusts bringing yellow fever to a certain village or something. Maybe you have wounds and you have to traverse through swampy, infected areas that get in your wound. Whatever the case, you have chances of catching some diseases. Now, diseases typically last 5 days, so keep that in mind over the course of all these descriptions and numbers and stats and things. This is all kind of within a 5-day period. Now, it can go beyond that. I'll go over that in a moment. But diseases typically last about 5 days. And you can see in this chart, there's virulence levels: weak, mild, malignant, and deadly. Each one has its own difficulty threshold that you would have to beat in different checks necessary. And they give you disease points, which are similar to damage points, but not damage points. So keep in mind, for those 5 days, you can see, like in weak, you might get 1 point a day, totaling 5 within those 5 days, or in mild, 2 points a day, totaling in 10 within those 5 days. But like I said, they stack. Let me just bring this back up here. So if on your health condition chart, say you have some circles checked off from some wounds, from battles, a sword slash, or from falling or something, those are there. And say you're all the way up to okay and you have a -1. And then you catch a disease. Now these diseases, you're going to start circling in these circles and filling those in, and they're going to stack. So if you start getting up to okay and bad, those negative penalties are going to start adding up, and they're going to start stacking on checks you have to do. So you need to be careful, and you need to rest, especially if you have injuries and you catch a disease, or you have a disease and you catch some injuries. You know what I mean? So be careful. But that's the chart. That's how you basically read it. Let's get into how it works and recovering and all that sort of stuff. Let's see, resting and recovery. The first thing with resting, again, remembering that it lasts 5 days, is you need to rest every day, just like with normal damages with wounds and stuff. And I'm not going to read this word for word. Get the book, check out all the details, but ultimately you need to rest the entire 5 days. If you don't and you mess up, it can be extended basically. And then you have to do a check and see if you basically get a 6th day where you encompass basically more damage points, disease points, I should say, on top of whatever damage points you might have. And then another day you have to do another check and see if you can shake the disease after that. So it can last 5 days. But then at the end of 5 days, you either heal up and you get all your points back, or if you messed up by not resting, it can extend a day. And then you have to do another check and you get more disease damage. And then it can extend another day and you have to check it. And if you don't, you can end up, guess what? Dying. So yes, it's just as brutal. So always remember that if you mess up, chances are you're going to die. In any of these rules, any of these scenarios, any of these tutorial crash courses, it's that brutal in Shadows of Esteren. But ultimately, what the takeaway here is, you want to rest. You want to rest uninterrupted. You want to rest all 5 days, and then you get all the points back. Now, as long as you make these checks, and let's go over treatment and cures, because that's important to this. And this I will read because this involves actually getting points back, getting the check daily, that sort of thing. But ultimately, to do treatments and cures, the first thing you have to do is a medicine check 11 to determine which disease you have. Once you know what disease you have, the healer can start trying to do a medicine check 14 each day to reduce your disease damage by 1 point. So if they're successful each day of that 5 days and they're reducing at 1 point, and you just have, let's go back to the virulence chart here, and you just have a weak disease that only gives you 1 point a day, it's going to reduce that 1 point a day, so you're not going to take any of that damage. So keep that in mind with treatments and cures. You can end up not taking any of the damage if it's weak. Now, going beyond that, it's only going to reduce it 1. So if you're taking 2 disease points a day or 3 points a day and you reduce it 1, you're still going to be taking what's left every day of those 5 days. But you're going to get all that back at the very end of 5 days as long as you rest. As long as you're resting during that time, you'll get that back. Now, keep in mind, resting is going to help in healing the disease, making sure that you get all those points back at the end. But if you're resting for a disease, you cannot get points back by resting for actual damage, not disease damage, but battle damage. Remember I said they stack. So in resting, like I said, with getting points back, you know, from damage, like during the day getting a point, overnight getting a point, that sort of thing. If you have a disease, resting isn't going to help those damage. That already negates that. So the only thing you can rely on at that point are your discipline and domain, your medicine checks, your specific like treatment checks. The resting is going to have to go towards the disease. So yet another reason you don't want to catch a disease while you have damage, or get some damages while you have a disease. So yeah, that's how that works basically. If you're getting treated, it reduces it by a point a day. Let's see, a regular failure has no effect, but critical failures and successes apply normally. The same effects can be obtained by taking herbal remedies without need for medicine rolls. If a PC does not get enough rest, the disease can go on beyond its normal duration, as we described in the last thing when I was going over resting and recovering. And yeah, regarding diseases causing death rather than disease points, the physician can only make one difficulty 17 medicine roll to save the patient. So keep that in mind. If you're getting a disease that's involving death, you're not worried about like daily checks to reduce points and all that. I mean, it's just going to give you death. So they have to do one difficulty 17 medicine check to save you from that. So you see how brutal Shadows of Esteren can be. Now, let me bring up some sample diseases. You can see here like yellow fever, stomach flu, and such. These are just some samples. I'm not going to go into all of them in detail or read it to you. They all have their own little details and intricacies of how they work and how they affect you and how you might be able to incorporate them into gameplay as a game leader. But one thing I do want to bring up here is how some of them have an incubation time. This incubation time has to do with the time of it takes for the effects to kind of set in. So if something has a slow incubation time, you would roll a 1d10. It takes that many months for the disease to start taking effect. If it's fast, 3d10 days. If it's short, 1d10 hours. Some of them don't have an incubation period in which, like, you know, game leader's discretion, it should automatically just kind of kick in immediately. But you know, again, game leader's discretion. All these rules are just here for guidance. Make the game your own. Make it for you and your players so it's fun. The first rule is have fun. But anyways, that's what incubation time has to do with these diseases. And you can see just how brutal diseases can be in Shadows of Esteren aside from normal combat damage. All right, well, there you have it. There's healing and alternative damage. I hope this video was just as helpful as all the other Crash Course tutorials. I do want to ask you one favor. Please like this video, leave me a comment, give a share. Every little bit helps. We're trying to give Shadows of Esteren and Studio Agate the exposure it deserves. This game is absolutely amazing, so we would love your help and support in that way. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.
Cybernation Uncensored.